So in this video, we just want to discuss what goes into making our curriculums, because they're a very, very drawn out process, and I think it's really important that you understand the level of detail that we go into creating them. And these aren't just things that we pluck out of the air, these are things that we always use in our academy and we always test. So essentially there's kind of three phases that go on. In fact, before we get into any of that, curriculums are important. Like, regardless of what you think, they can be hugely beneficial to your academy. Because if you don't have a curriculum, how do you know what you're teaching? How do you know what your students need to work on? How do you know that you've not already recovered that subject? What happens if you go away and you can't teach? Yeah, that's the most
important thing. Like, what happens if you aren't there? Like, you have to be able to pass on your whatever, your lesson plans, your plan, something to whoever's going to be teaching.
Yeah, they're incredibly, incredibly important and so overlooked in jiu-jitsu and kind of in the martial arts world as general. There's a reason that, like, colleges, universities have curriculums that they're trying to teach, because they know that there needs to be a path that people go down to learn and to develop.
If you don't have standards, you can never achieve, because you'll just be constantly working towards nothing, essentially, and curriculum set a standard.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons that we have them. The basic process that we go through is, firstly, you've got to identify that a curriculum is important, and if you...
Like, a program is important.
Yeah,
like
just the same thing. Exactly.
A space for the curriculum.
So you've got to identify that you need a curriculum. The second step is that you go through, like, a planning phase. What do we kind of ideally expect to get out of this curriculum? How long is it going to be? What do we think that's probably going to go into it? Okay. The second phase, the second phase or third phase, depending on how you look at it, is what we actually put that into place. So we implement the curriculum in our academy and start to test the results, see what works, see what doesn't, move things around and adjust it accordingly. And then the final phase is we go into, like, actually creating the curriculum. So we go through, like, making the lesson plans. We then, record all of the things, and we upload it, edit it, all of those kind of things. So before we dive into what kind of goes into each section a little bit, this process takes us, excluding, like, recording the videos and the testing of it, excluding, like, the testing of it, which is multiple classes.
Multiple
months,
depending on the
years
program.
often. Is probably 200 to 300 hours per curriculum. So they are super, super in depth. So when you get them, there's a huge amount that's gone into them. And these aren't, like I said, these aren't just things that we've plucked out of the air. They're what we're using in our academy on a day-to-day basis. So Chelsea does a lot of the planning work for the curriculum. So I'm going to pass it over to her a little bit, and she can kind of discuss that element and what happens.
What would you like me to discuss?
Whatever you
specifically? Well, I start planning curriculums, like we said, based on what we've decided we need in the in the academy. There are classes we don't have curriculums for, like our essentials classes, because they're much more, they follow kind of an organic flow of the classes instead. When I decide to plan a curriculum, the first thing I do is I sit down and I think about the student base, what I can ideally expect from them as an outcome. So, for instance, a beginner's no-gi program, what do I want from them as an outcome? I want them to be able to go into one of our no-gi classes, not get hurt, not get scared of, like, the intensity of the class, and be able to kind of do some kind of approximation of the techniques that they're learning in those classes. So by the end of the curriculum, they need to be able to move appropriately for, like, a low-level student, like, be able to handle themselves in the sense that they won't just go in there and know nothing. They need to know basic body movements, which they may or may not know going in. And they need to kind of start to understand basic, if we're talking about no-gi, basic no-gi grips and how they're different from gi grips if you're having people transfer, like we are, from gi to no-gi, for instance.
Yeah, and so then we obviously have to consider, like, time frame, like how long do we want this program to be. So we've played around with lots of different lengths of programs, some short, some longer, and it's based on, what becomes the natural transition point for people. So, for example, our beginners program, like the gi beginners program, is 16 weeks. That's what we set it out to be.
But we also have a 4-week one, because sometimes you're pressed for time, you're pressed for space, you're pressed for... You have other kind of scheduling restrictions, and you can't go through a 16-week program. It's just not feasible. We've been in that situation. That's why the 4-week program was developed, and it was developed with the same idea in mind, allowing beginners to transfer from that beginner program into a essentials program or like your generalized classes without any kind of real problem. That's more successful for some
so
people than
each of the curriculums has a very specific idea. We kind of touched on it. So often we get questions like, for example, why isn't side control in our beginners curriculum? Or why don't you have, I had one the other day, why don't we have self-defense techniques in our curriculum? Why don't we have X or Y? And it's because the goal of each curriculum is specific. So the beginners is a good example because it's quite a short program. We aren't trying to create people that are like excellent at jiu-jitsu. We're trying to create people that can learn jiu-jitsu. So they have an understanding of positional hierarchies. They have different skills that they have. Like, for example, we want them to know how to transition from mount to side control, but we don't want them to stay in side control. Yeah. One of the big problems that you have, particularly with beginners, is they get to side control, they just squeeze the life out of each other. And that's it. And that's the entire role that they have. And that's not particularly productive.
No, and it's not realistic to expect somebody to be able to escape side control in that environment either. It's hard for our comp class guys. Like when we work side control in comp classes, it's one of the hardest sessions that they have. It's unfair to expect beginners to go through that. It's not realistic. You're building bad habits in them. You have a lot of reasons not to include those kinds of things in your program, I have a lot of reasons that I don't include things in programs. And every technique that I choose is specific, and I choose it for a number of different reasons. For one, time to teach the technique. That's a big one. So like, Tom and I know tons of advanced techniques, and many techniques will do to serve the same purpose, but often I'm looking to pare back the amount of actual learning that needs to happen to impart a concept. So for instance, right now in this comp curriculum I had the choice between a De La Riva sweep to the side and a tripod sweep. So I put the tripod sweep in. I don't want instructors spending time trying to teach a De La Riva sweep to the side when they should be teaching a different concept that defeats the purpose of the curriculum.
Yeah, so that's kind of the initial writing phase of it, right? That's what we do. We figure out kind of the broad strokes of what we want, how we think the techniques are going to play together. Then you go into a testing phase. Okay, the testing phase is where we actually implement it in our classes. Because really, if you've never done it in a class, you don't know how it's going to flow. You don't know if you've included too much information or too little information, whether the students are going to be able to grasp it in a single session, whether you need multiple sessions. So that's what we do then. And we're continually taking the base curriculums, looking at them, tweaking them, adjusting them, adding, taking away things until we've done it and we know it works and we've got the result at the end of the program that we're looking for.
At this point, I've gotten pretty good at it, and I can pretty much guess what's gonna work and what's gonna fit and what's gonna fit in classes and fit in specific time frames for our students. So I know that if I pass a curriculum on to you guys, for instance, I know it's going to take you longer because you have to learn the technique. Your students have to learn the technique. You have to teach in a different kind of style and with a different set of maybe goals than you normally would, because we have very specific things we're always trying to impart in every session. So timing can be difficult.
Yeah, and that's one of the key things that we start to look at, because our goal is to be able to, each one of these curriculums when we create it is firstly to be able to hand it off to an instructor in our gym, because we know that there's points that we're away. For example, we're recording this at the end of the January. We have Europeans coming up in a couple of days. Chelsea and I are going to be away. We're not going to be there, so we have to pass the information off to somebody else so the class is maintained running. Most gyms will have that. Whether you want to have a holiday, whether you're sick, whether you're going to a competition, whether you're doing X, Y, or Z, you need to be able to pass that off. So that's kind of also what we're looking at. We want to impart the information in a way that anybody can access it and use it and start to use it straight away. Now, you might not be able to teach the curriculum as well as we can immediately, particularly on your first iteration. This is what we find with our instructors when they come to teach it. By the second time or third time or fourth time they've gone through it, they can do it really well. And they'll have imparted their own personality onto it, their own style on it, but we'll still be getting the same results at the end of it, which is what we want. And this is the same that we found with our affiliates and other people who have used the beginner's curriculum, the kids' curriculum, for example. It's not about the way that we teach it necessarily, or we do have that kind of instructor training program. You have your own personality, you have your own style. You're not going to be able to do it straight away because, as Chelsea says, you're still learning not necessarily learning the techniques, but learning how to teach those techniques, the important elements that we're trying to get across.
And the reality is that even advanced students that come to our gym struggle sometimes to adapt to the way that we do jiu-jitsu. We have very strange movement patterns. We come from that kind of AOJ Alto school of jiu-jitsu that is very different and kind of unique. So there is a lot of different things in the curriculums that you may not get from other curriculums just because we come from a different line, essentially. Like I said, we have advanced students, brown, black belts come in and they struggle because it's just different. It's just completely different than a lot of traditional jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and that's not to say that what you're doing is necessarily wrong or incorrect.
Not at all. It's just our style of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's our style, but always what we're trying to do, any technique that we put down in a curriculum or teach our students is battle tested. We only try to impart techniques that are going to be 80% techniques. So they work 80% of the time and 80% of the people can do them. So you'll see things that are just like a great example. One of the best ones I can think of is the baseball bat choke from Majid Hedge. Majid was wrecking people. He's got that really famous video of him choking out Clark Gracie. But how many other people are using it successfully at high level competition? The answer is very, very few, which is why it's not something that we necessarily include in the technique, because it becomes down to Majid's just having giant hands and insane grip strength being an attribute. Not everybody's got that. So that's what we look for when we're teaching those techniques. So once we've gone through that kind of, testing phase would be the next one, then we actually start to lay it down and we write the lesson plans and we write the class schedules. The
lesson plans at this point. They just get revised.
Well, they get refined, sorry. The lesson plans get refined.
There's usually about 100 hours of writing that goes into the ebooks and things before we even start to film anything.
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time doing that. And then we go into the filming of it. The filming is going to take, each video that we typically do for adults or kids really is about 30 minutes, I would say. Between 15 and 30 minutes per lesson, depending on the amount of content in it. We end up with probably at least 30, 40 hours worth of footage, which then gets edited down into videos. So we probably end up another 100 hours of video editing. So by the time that we've done this kind of process, it will have been months and months of work and energy of retesting and refining. Actually even before we get to the recording, and then plus we have an extra couple of 100 hours of recording and creating on top of that. That is a lot of work that goes into these curriculums. And the cool thing is that by doing all of this work, we know, as I said before, that we can literally give them to somebody.
We had a couple new beginners coaches come on recently because some of our other coaches just had their schedules changed, whatever. We had some new beginners coaches come on. All I had to do was tell Tom to give them access to the site, and now they have a whole beginners curriculum. I never have to talk to them again. Well, I will, because they're my coaches, but I never have to go through what they should be teaching. I never have to even really check on them, honestly. They're up there doing their thing, and I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, what we end up checking on is the results. When they go from that beginners program to the main program, which is really the core test, when they come in, are they able to follow instruction? Are they able to do the things that we want them to do? And as long as they're doing that,
have an issue.
Cool. Yeah, the other thing that we'll look at is whether the beginners are
happy.
Yeah, if they're staying
and
in their classes, they're training regularly. Yeah. They're training. That's it. Do I necessarily agree with the way that they're teaching everything? And
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. That's their own personality they're injecting into it.
The outcome is what's important. You want happy students. You want happy beginners. I think the biggest thing that we find with our beginners is that they don't want to leave the beginners classes. So I'm happy. That's all I can ask for my instructors is that you have these students, they're a little bit nervous to go into the main classes. Tom and I can be intimidating. Those big classes can be intimidating, but the fact that they just want to stay with their instructor, that's all you need.
Yeah, so they really work. They genuinely work, and these are things that we genuinely use in our academy all the time.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that we've released them to people is because
there's so much work that went into them. That's why. So much work went into them.
No, the reason that we've done it is because they take so much time. So many instructors, I talk to instructors regularly. I have meetings with instructors. We have a whole business group that we run, that we're part of, to try and help jiu-jitsu instructors, and they are so burnt out with doing advertising, marketing, sales, teaching classes, all of this kind of stuff. You literally have, we're creating resources that can be implemented in your academy, and all you've got to do is use them.
Yeah.
And that's the reason that we did it, is so it takes some of that brain space, like the operating memory, away from you. Just implement the things that we say. They work really, really well. Run through them a couple of times. If there's things that you don't like which still fit in with what you're doing, then go ahead and tweak them. But at least you have this base functional curriculum that you can start working from. And as we said, if you're ill, injured, away at a competition, just need a break, you can easily hand them over to people who can do a great job of teaching them. So that's a little bit of an insight into our curriculums and how we create them and the energy and effort that goes into it. Oh, probably should tell you, if you want to learn more about our curriculums, then you might want to check out Escapology online. If you go there, then you'll be able to find everything that we do. We have curriculums for beginners, kids, no-gi, gi. We're going to have competition curriculum soon. We've got an instructor training program. Basically anything that you'd need to start running an academy or passing off the teaching side of things, improving your own teaching, whatever you want, just go check it out. And if you have any questions, comment below.